Adam,
Yeah,
is this an ad?
this is an ad for Mutinex. Mutinex are a marketing mix modeling company.
Why do I need one of those?
Well, then you can model the return on every single marketing decision you do.
So you wouldn't do an ad like this?
You'll never have to do an ad like this ever again.
Mutinex Growth OS, your best decisions start here. For more information or to request a demo, visit mutinex.co. That's mutinex.co.
I think it's really important that we tell stories that resonate with all people.
And how does the traditional ballet community respond to that?
Believe it or not, people are saying, is this the first time that a gay story has been told on stage in classical ballet? And it is one of the first times a story of a homosexual kind of overtone, not even undertone, is told on stage, which is shocking.
Hey, Brent, how are you?
Good, Adam. Good, Adam. Hey, now, look, do you remember when we had Hegarty on the show?
Yep.
And he talked about the need to get out of advertising, to find inspiration beyond the confines of the advertising world.
I do.
Is that something that you preach at your agency?
No, I preach just do more hard work. Just solve a problem. Don't go out.
Don't go out of advertising. Stay in advertising.
Yeah, no. And obviously I'm joking. But today we do have somebody from outside of advertising to join us on the
We do, and
pod.
some might say a truly creative industry.
Yeah, or a truly creative person in a
Yeah.
truly creative industry. It's David Hallberg. David is one of the most renowned ballet dancers of our time. Danced at the Bolshoi in America, and he's now at the Australian Ballet as its creative director and the driving force creatively behind everything the Australian Ballet does. And it's quite a coup that he came to Australia to do that. And
To do this podcast. Oh, no, to do
Yes. And we're going to talk a little bit about how he got here and so on. And so let's welcome David. David, hello.
Hello, great to be on the show and, great to talk all things creative. I am not an advertiser, so I won't try and speak your spiel, but happy to be on the show.
Are you a creative soul?
I've always been, interested with that question, truth be told, because as a dancer, I, interpreted roles that were created hundreds of years ago.
Mm.
So there was creative interpretation in what I danced, but I wasn't creating things from the ground up per se. Through my artistic life, I've always actually wondered, am I actually an artist if I'm not creating something from the ground up?
As a kid, I know you were into dance from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
Were you making up your own shit, or were you dancing to stuff that already existed?
When I started, I was making up my own shit. I was in the basement of our house. Fred Astaire was my obsession.
Mm.
Wanted to be exactly like him. So I taped coins on the bottom of my penny loafers and made makeshift tap shoes, and just didn't know how to tap dance, technically speaking. So I just made up my own shit.
And whereabouts did you grow up?
I grew up in Arizona, in the United States, mainly. Wasn't born there, but mainly Arizona.
So it was just you and all the other guys growing up with pennies tapped to their shoes dancing, or was that an odd thing to do?
It was such an odd thing to do. I didn't know it was odd until people told me it was odd, like the guys that I went to school with. But no one else was doing that.
And was Arizona a creative place to grow up? Was there much creative inspiration? Was it about the local football team? I mean, what was sort of the culture like where you grew up in Arizona?
Arizona was so artistically boring. There actually was a professional ballet company there, which is great, still is. But there wasn't much. All the kids were playing, t-ball or football or all the sports, soccer. And I wanted to do the exact opposite. So I was definitely a kind of outlier in a way, of the black sheep amongst my peers.
Was that hard, easy?
It was hard as a kid, I will say. I was really bullied. And what's funny about something that comes out of you so naturally, dancing came out of me so naturally. I was so possessed by it that I actually thought it was normal. And then I looked around the room and everyone, like I said, everyone was telling me it wasn't normal. And they made sure to make fun of me because it wasn't normal. All I wanted to do was dance, which felt really normal, still feels normal.
Can you remember a time where you weren't dancing,
I
or
mean, I
you?
had a pretty standard suburban childhood. It wasn't obsessively dance from the get-go. Like I played in the yard with, friends in the neighborhood. I went on family vacations, and so it wasn't at the beginning. It was just kind of an interest. And then as the years rolled on, like I started around 8 or 9, at 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16 is when like the obsession like was at its peak. And I didn't do anything but dance and train, eat, sleep, breathe ballet, essentially. It eventually became. When it started, it was just like, oh, I think this is pretty cool. I want to try this. But it wasn't this kind of like obsession all the time.
Who put you on the right track? Or if everyone in the schoolyard is saying, mate, dancing's not cool, and you were pursuing it because you were born to, you must have got some positive reinforcement along the way, or met people, or something must have happened with that kept you on the right track.
Yeah, that's a great question. The people that kept me on the right track at the onset were my parents. They were like, "You want to do that? Fine. You want to keep doing that? Great. We totally support that." When I eventually realized I wanted to do that as my life's kind of work or my job, they were never like, you can't have a job doing that.
Get a real job.
Get a real job, or go to university. Where when I was a teenager, it was becoming very apparent that as a dancer, your prime time to bloom is when people are typically at university.
Mm.
So I was never discouraged by my parents, but also I had some amazing teachers, and also some amazing teachers at school, like academics. My like the music teacher or my sixth grade teacher, and they were just like they saw this passion in me, and they were like, keep going for it. And they had no dance background, but they just saw that I was this kind of like, kid obsessed with something very different.
And ironically, it sounds like you grew up in a pretty sport mad kind of place. It takes athletic levels of dedication and training and sacrifice, right, to be good at it.
Like I realized that eventually that it took all my time and dedication, and like the Olympics having just finished, like I can look at the athletes and sort of relate back to when I was a dancer. I was just like, it just took so much sacrifice, but also I never saw it as a sacrifice, which is the kind of that balance you find when you like love something so much and maybe you are like sort of good at it.
Mm.
You don't see it. You're not like, I'm going to sacrifice, I don't know, relationships or time, or like you just do it. You don't question it.
David, at the moment you're artistic director, but before you got there, you were one of, if not the top dancer in the world. And you made the point before, you questioned whether that was artistic. Because if I look at the Olympians and say, take a shot put person who has to do shot put over and over and over and over again, it would be a long stretch to say that shot put person was pursuing an artistic endeavor. As a dancer, and also in the ballet specifically, where some of the ballets are hundreds of years old that you're stepping into the shoes of, where do you nut out on that? Were you being creative?
But maybe gymnastics is a better, because shot put's a long way away.
Yeah.
Maybe gymnastics, where there is a artistic element to it, but also an incredible athletic. I don't know. Maybe that's a better analogy.
Yeah, I mean, like, not to get existential really, but that was a really huge question for me, because I played the Prince in Swan like my entire dancing career. I that's one of the ballets I danced the most, or the Prince in Sleeping Beauty, and these are the classics of ballet repertoire. And I basically was just doing the steps that were created in like 1890. And so, what is creative about that? I would ask myself, or like, am I actually an artist? I guess not an artist in terms of like, I wasn't someone putting ideas onto a page, or I wasn't like painting a picture, but I think there was artistic expression in what I danced, but was also written. It's like being a concert pianist. You play Beethoven, but you creatively interpret Beethoven, but you're not writing it. It's a tricky question.
Well, maybe that's another way. Did you feel creatively fulfilled as a dancer?
Not all the time. I loved, dancing Swan Lake, but there was always a part of me that wanted more. And actually, my cup and my time was so full with dancing Swan Lake around the world. My regrets, in a way, now that I'm looking back, is that I didn't pursue more creative dreams or ambitions or ideas.
Within those roles or outside of ballet?
Yeah, outside ballet, like creating stuff, creating dance, creating new work, collaborating with artists, as a dancer, with composers or with choreographers. Because in the ballet world, things can be very formulaic. You join the company, you dance in the court of ballet, you're one of the 32 swans if you're a woman. Then maybe you dance the lead swan, or I dance the prince, and then you retire. I mean, you really become a part of you become a part of like this formula, this ballet formula. That if you think about, if you have ideas beyond it, not all dancers have ideas beyond that, by the way. Like if you do have ideas beyond that, there's a desire for more.
We're setting you up a bit because we're going to talk about how you've made those manifest in a bit. But before we do, how did you end up in Australia?
How did I get here? I well, I first came to the country in 2010 I did the Nutcracker with the Australian Ballet, and then I had a really bad foot injury in 2014. I had two botched surgeries on my foot. They tried to fix it, didn't work. And I was either going to retire early, I was in my early 30s, mid 30s, or I had heard and knew that the medical team with the Australian Ballet was the best in the ballet world, in the dance world. They have an amazing reputation. So I asked the former artistic director if I could come down and rehab with the team, and he said yes. So I bought a one-way ticket to Australia and stayed here 14 months, and fell in love with the country, fell in love with the company. They got me back on stage, back into my career. Then the then director was leaving the position after 20 years, and all stars aligned. And truth be told, it's sort of I see it as like my giving back to what they gave me. They gave me back my dancing career, but also from the get-go loved Australia, love the people. I'm not just, fishing here or throwing compliments. But it's the truth. I'm very happy here.
And what do you love about Australian people? What is it that makes us different to where you grew up, or like what is it?
I'm not allowed to take myself too seriously. I was given a nickname right away, which means that you become, I don't know, you're a part of a community in a way. America is, I'm proudly American, but it's just, there's so much.
Pretty fucked up.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. It's like I'm happily watching it from a distance at this stage.
What's your nickname, David?
I have two. At least I know two that they say to my face. One is Davo.
Of course.
Yeah, and the other is Bergsy because my last name is Hallberg.
Yeah, Bergsy. Davo Bergsy. Perfect.
Davo the ballet dancer.
Davo the dancer. Yeah. But it's interesting. Do you think there is something in that, there is a level of seriousness to what you do, right? Like and do you think that sort of self-deprecating, don't take it too seriously, Davo, is that actually good? Is that actually good for the actual creative process and output that you have? Do you know what I mean? Is there something that happens with that level of don't take yourself too seriously that changes what you do in the space?
It's a great question because I I challenge that with the dancers now as artistic director, because culture is super important to me, and I think like as a company we're a really healthy, positive company. And I worked in Russia where it's not a healthy, positive environment. On the other hand, I want the dancers to have this, ambition to be the best,
Mm.
this ambition to be their best, or to be the best in the room, or to be the best on stage. I want the dancers to think when they go on stage, watch me and only me, in a way, because that gives that kind of edge of competition or hunger. And so it's a bit of a balancing act, because I really appreciate the kind of community that the Australian ballet is, but I want people to realize the greatest reaches of their potential.
So don't take it too easy. You need a bit of edge. You need a bit of, yeah.
You do, and also, like, what I love is pushing the dancers beyond their level of comfort. That I can see the potential they have, or that I want more. I want them to give more, and I'm not shy at like pushing them beyond that level of comfort, because that's when I think the real results are shown.
It's a fascinating conversation because ballet to me seems so exacting,
Precise.
so precise, so you have to learn exactly the right way to do something, and you'll get beaten if you don't. And I'm sure that's not there anymore, but that kind of thing. So to have a sense of casualness about that, or a sense of even self-expression within those confines, must be quite, I'd imagine, quite liberating, or even confusing for a potential dancer.
It's so true. And I think what's really interesting, what I'm most attracted to when I see a dancer, is that they're defining balletic movement, which is very codified themselves. How are they interpreting it individually? Because with a classical art form like this, it so easily becomes about execution of technique, and that's so boring. It is so boring. Like when you have the smartest know-it-all in the room, like how boring is that? When you have like a creative that's saying, I want to express it this way, and then an original voice or opinion comes out, that is when I think dance, or any art form, truth be told, is most interesting.
So that must be getting pretty subtle. If you're one of the swans in such a well-established narrative, that's getting pretty subtle, isn't it, to bring something of yourself to that particular part? If for an artistic director, obviously there's a whole lot of ways that can come to life, but as a player in a big part, that's pretty subtle.
It is. One of the first rehearsals that I took when I took over as artistic director was one of the greatest pieces of corps de ballet work, group work, in a ballet called La Bayadere. And there was 24, women in tutus in straight lines, all precision. So you're a bit like a soldier, standing in line and doing exactly the same as everyone in the room. But what I expressed was everyone in the room has equal importance and value, and the pride and the care and the quality that they take in the work as an individual, therefore in unison as a group, is paramount. So it's important for me. Yes, it has to be like very specific, and everyone has to be the same. But it's important that they feel their work is of absolute importance and is as important as the person in the spotlight in front of them.
When you think about the way that you lead the company, process or culture, what's more important? Or are they both important? Can you not separate that? But like, is it more important to be so precise with the process and be able to replicate it? Or is it this sort of culture of individual expression is important, pride's important? Like, yeah, how do you think about those two things?
The narrative has changed because it used to be only about process.
Yeah.
And I think in a company like the Bolshoi in Moscow, it's still about process. Culture doesn't really matter. now the narrative, I think, as a world, as a en masse population, it's changed into culture. And so I think if you have a good culture within an organization, the process is easier to achieve.
Mm.
And I think by setting the standard of what the culture is, the culture can also be about excellence. You know, it can be about like community and positivity and mental well-being, but it can also be about excellence. So if you set the culture within the organization, within the dancers, like our culture is about excellence, then the process is easier to achieve. So I would say culture.
Adam,
Yeah?
is this an ad?
This is an ad for Mutinex. Mutinex are a marketing mix modelling company.
Why do I need one of those?
Well, then you can model the return on every single marketing decision you do.
So you wouldn't do an ad like this?
You would never have to do an ad like this ever again.
Mutinex Growth OS, your best decisions start here. For more information or to request a demo, visit mutinex.co. That's mutinex.co.
Did you ever come across Paul Roos, who's a AFL coach in your time? No, so he's now got a...
You're really testing me here.
Oh, I don't.
You're really putting me on the
I just
spot.
thought I'd give it.
The minute you said AFL,
I thought I'd give it a crack. He's got a culture building agency, and their motto is "Don't leave culture to chance." And so it's kind of define the culture you want, set that culture, and then everything kind of looks after itself. And then the stronger that culture is, the less you need rules and processes, because everyone's kind of got the memo as to what you're about and can interpret that. And it kind of sounds like what you're saying there.
that's so true.
So you're a dancer with a bit of an existential angst. You felt like you wanted to be a little bit more creative, and then you've become creative director. How does your creativity manifest itself now as a kind of, what do you look for? What's your creative process? And we'll start broad.
The whole MO or the goalposts have shifted because now it's not about me. And as a dancer, it is a very selfish career. You know, you worry about your body and how it's feeling, whether it's injured or whether it's not. You worry about your shows, your costume. It's very selfish. And now, you know, I worry about 80 dancers, and I worry about the reputation of an arts organization, of a ballet company, or what repertoire we're performing and showing audiences. Although, again, I'm not creating per se, I'm not creating the ballets, I'm not choreographing the steps. I'm more curating things and allowing and kind of facilitating opportunity to choreographers, a facilitating opportunity for the dancers to dance certain ballets and for audiences to see these ballets. So it feels really creative when I'm, you know, commissioning work, or when I'm bringing in certain pieces of repertoire, or choosing a brand campaign and imagery. But again, I feel more like a facilitator and more like a curator than actually a creator, but it feels very, very creative.
You're about to launch a new ballet. Is it the first time this has been done anywhere?
Yes.
Do you want to talk about this?
So we're premiering a work called Oscar on Friday the 13th. Don't read into that. At the Regent Theatre in Melbourne. And we've commissioned Christopher Wheeldon, who, you know, is one of the great choreographers living today. He's done a good amount of stuff on Broadway. He did the Michael Jackson show on Broadway, which is actually coming to Australia in, I think, 25. So he's a great mind. And he's brought together his team of creatives. So sets and costumes, commissioned score by Joby Talbot, who is one of his creative partners. He's recently did the new Wonka movie, so very cinematic musically, and it's created from the ground up, and it's created at the Australian Ballet. So it's a good example that this company is a creating company that creates full length, you know, full evening works, 2X. So it's a really big commission, but it's amazing to see like all the creative kind of energies bouncing around the building right now before we open.
And David, is there more risk in that? So is there more risk in commissioning a brand new ballet, it's never been done before, versus just taking a standard and delivering that? Like, how do you feel like there's more risk here? There's more on the line?
Definitely is more on the line. It's been, obviously a big financial commitment, to put it bluntly, but it's also a big risk creatively, because some ballets open and close and never have a return season, just like shows on Broadway. And then some become the new masterpieces of this era. And so it is a big risk, but I think it would be too easy and too lazy to only do work that's pre-existing. Because at one stage, Swan Lake was created and the audience
Yeah,
actually.
It's a good way to look at it. And it's called Oscar because it's based around Oscar Wilde's life, right? Is it a narrative of his life or his work, or?
Yeah, so it's based on Oscar Wilde's life and stories, really. We're kind of intertwining his life, which was very colorful, for lack of a better word. And then some of his stories like Nightingale and the Rose and Dorian Gray. But we're choosing, Chris is choosing as well, the choreographer, to tell Oscar's true story. I mean, he had a wife and kids, he had affairs with men, he went on trial for that. He was tried and spent a couple of years in jail for gross indecency and sodomy. And we're showing, his affairs and the fact that he fell in love with guys. We're showing that he had a family and kids. We're showing his stories. And ballet has been really timid about telling stories that are only heteronormative. As a dancer, I fell in love with the princess or women my whole life, and I'm a gay man. So I now, as director, I think it's really important that we tell stories that resonate with all people.
And how does the traditional ballet community respond to that?
Believe it or not, people are saying, is this the first time that a gay story has been told on stage in classical ballet? And it is one of the first times a story of a homosexual kind of overtone, not even undertone, is told on stage, which is shocking. It's like
I can imagine there's a lot of women, older women in Turak, who would be outraged by by this.
There might be, but I think I have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to tell stories of that resonate with people that aren't just live a certain life.
Is that one of the challenges, David, that and I'm probably stereotyping a little bit here, but the audience of ballet does seem a bit older, a bit more conservative. Is that one of the challenges? And do you see your role as challenging that audience, or maybe broadening that audience, bringing new people in? Like, how do you think about that?
I see it actually as both. I mean, I also love and respect those more conservative audience members that want Swan Lake, because we do Swan Lake. But also I see it as challenging them a bit, but I also see it mainly as broadening our audience and saying, hey, listen, we're actually not just a flock of swans. We are an arts company that tells different kinds of stories that are sometimes not easy even to, like art doesn't always have to be happy. Art, dance can be kind of challenging. It can be interesting, thought-provoking, and that's essentially what we're trying to do with Oscar.
I think it's very clever as well, using Oscar Wilde, and just purely from a marketing perspective, because of the familiarity of the name. It's somebody that gives people a sense of, oh yeah, I've heard of Oscar Wilde, or may have read something or so on. But that de-risks the whole thing just a little bit as well. I do think it's kind of ironic as well that Oscar Wilde was such a wordsmith, and you're not going to be able to hear any of his his words in the ballet.
No, we're interpreting his words through movement, and that's that's the challenge choreographically.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I mean, listen, the ballet world, we dance Shakespearean tales as well. So
you're used to it.
we've gotten very good at trying to tell a story like A Midsummer Night's Dream or Story of Oscar Wilde through movement.
And how do you think about audience response to your works?
Do you test it? Do you test the concept? Do you pilot the concept with people? Do you market research?
Audiences have become really, really important to me as in this role. I mean, obviously, you would think audiences are really important to someone as a dancer or as a performer, but the relationship is very different. Like, as a dancer, you're responding to audience reaction, and as an artistic director, I think I'm listening to audience needs, or maybe even something that they don't know they want yet. Um, but we never do market research. We never pilot anything. It's not really done in the dance world um, in terms of concept. But we do take. I mean, we take a ton of data. We really try and listen not only in terms of dry data, but in terms of the emotion, the desire of an audience, and the reaction of an audience. And how people are moved or maybe not moved by a work. And then that will obviously very much inform, how I curate works in the future. I really want to give audiences what they want. Like I want them to be satisfied, but I also want to give them something that maybe they don't know they quite yet want to see. And it's tricky. I mean, it's a gamble.
David, we have a love-hate relationship here with market research on this podcast. And one of the things we like to do is we like to put people's work to what we call the pub test. And the pub test, so we take their work and we show a whole lot of people down at the pub, and a research company called Ideally helps us do that. With you, we haven't taken an actual ballet that you've been the artistic director of, but we've taken the actual concept of ballet itself to the pub and asked people what they think. We haven't heard this, so we're now going to see if the concept of ballet itself passes the pub test. So let's have a listen and then we'll come back.
The pub test is brought to you by Ideally, the insights platform where ideas go to grow.
What's my perception of ballet? A dancing art form, very surface experience with it.
My perception of ballet, it's on at the Opera House. It seems to be on quite regularly.
My perception of ballet is it's like incredibly difficult and hard and intense but beautiful.
Fancy, I'd say, something that seems very, upper class. The idea is kind of like the opera, I would say. Yeah, there's not a lot of opportunity to watch ballet, maybe I'm in the wrong circle.
Would I ever go? Depends how hot my date is.
I think if the opportunity arose, I'd go to the ballet. I might take my daughter.
Yes, I would go to the ballet.
My sister used to do ballet classes as a kid. I feel like that's quite a common thing for young women to do, but I don't know if it's really something that's a big part of Australian culture.
I'd love to see a ballet about niche Australian politics, possibly some sort of motorcycle.
I don't know if they should be making it relevant or hip. I kind of like the classics, and I like things, when they do the real classics, so I don't think they should be changing too much.
I think every ballet production I see is like old school ballet. I don't think there's been some new, hip and creative ballet that's kind of, pushed the edge of like modern dance and different kind of ballet. It's all very traditional.
Got to try everything once, of course. Do I have a burning desire to go? Probably not.
Does it pass the pub test? Yes, in a way that I think that most people agree that ballet is an art form that is really challenging and it's generally considered a high value thing.
I think ballet passes the pub test.
Yes, sure. Ballet passes the pub test.
Does it pass the pub test? I don't think that's the kind of question you'd ask at a pub.
So there probably a few people there who would call you Davo, I'm sure. What are your thoughts, Davo? Does ballet pass the pub test? Do you care?
Do I care? I mean, the perceptions aren't surprising. I think, one thing I've been trying to get a gauge on living in Australia is where the Australian ballet or ballet fits in Australian culture. Because in Russia, like if you're a ballet dancer, you're like an AFL player. You know, you are celebrated, you're recognized. It's a, very different playing field. And I think I don't have an answer for you, but I think what I've been trying to read is like what the meaning of the Australian ballet and ballet in general is for Australians, because that's also important to me in my role. I believe in what the company does. I think also Australia should be super proud of the Australian ballet because it's one of the world's great ballet companies. It has amazing history and it represents and flies the flag of Australia really well around the world. I hear everything that they've said about it not resonating or like it's upper class or upper crust or if your date depends if your date is hot enough or like I think all those things are valid, but ballet in general, like I'm not too interested in AFL, and so people will be interested in ballet. And I don't expect everyone to be interested in ballet, just like not everyone will be interested in AFL, which I know I'm not of the majority. I've learned that quickly, but we're not for everybody, which is okay, but we certainly welcome everybody.
There's two questions there I kind of liked. The first one, what's its role? And I can understand what the Australian Ballet's role is to ballet around the world. I can understand it bringing a more casualised or comfortable with itself version of ballet to the rest of the world. I find that fascinating as to what ballet's role is within Australia, and good luck answering that. And the second point was lots of girls still grow up doing ballet, like it's a really big thing, and a few boys, but not nearly, but it's still a very, very popular thing to do. So the fall off rate must be very, very high because as adults, it's not nearly as popular as as other things. So I'm wondering if the ballet world is doing enough to keep people or keep all of those people who participate, in the art.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that ballet probably isn't. And I think where ballet is held can also be prohibitive. I think, the Sydney Opera House is amazing, and so is Arts Centre Melbourne, but they're sometimes not the most welcoming of venues.
Totally, they're stuffy.
So you need to put one on the MCG, David.
Yeah, interestingly, during the pandemic, we did a program at the tennis center at MCA. We had on the tennis court, like of course we took the tennis court away. We put a floor down. We had the orchestra in the back raised up. Everyone was in the stadium seating. Popcorn, hot dogs, soft drinks, whatever, beer, and the amount of first time
great
was amazing because we took it to a venue that was just really chill and relaxed. And it was one of the programs. It was very early on when I started. One of the programs I'm most proud of because I think we took it out of the Red Velvet Theatre and we put it in a tennis center.
So do you think more of that? You think we need more of that to sort of extend the reach and get more people to, experience it? And
definitely more of that. And I think as well for me, like it would be, a disservice if I thought that everyone would be attracted to coming to the theater in a red velvet, seat and with a suit on and, stuff like that. Initiatives like that really excite me as artistic director of the company.
You know why I like Ideally, Adam?
Why, Brent?
It's fast. You get insights overnight. And I think the main thing is it's not trying to test whether an idea should live or die, but it's trying to give you real insights that you can build on and make the creative better.
That sounded like an ad.
Because it was.
Do you know why I like Ideally?
Why?
Because they sponsor the black T-shirts.
They do.
If you want to do a pub test on your own, don't. Go to Ideally instead.
That's right. Visit goideally.com. That's goideally.com and find out how they can help.
So imagine you get a call from a lady called Rachel Gunn, who's Ray Gunn, who was the breakdancing lady, who's taken the world by storm. And she says, "I want to be part of the next ballet you put on." What are your thoughts? Do you embrace that?
My thoughts are she represented Australia brilliantly, and but that doesn't answer your question. It probably wouldn't be in a ballet. It could be in, we have a lot of other initiatives. Like we have a dance festival called Dance X, where we invite, all genres of dance. But she probably won't be amongst the swans anytime soon.
But coming back to you saying she represented us brilliantly, I'm really interested in this because there's no doubt you have a certain level of technical proficiency that you want to see from dancers, right? And I think, we think she's great, but she probably wasn't the most technically proficient dancer, right? So
Yeah.
What was brilliant? Why do you say it was brilliant? I'm really interested to understand that.
Because she had individuality.
Yeah.
Like she wasn't trying to be someone else, or she absolutely, when you look at her interpreting what she was doing, no one did it like her. And I go back to my comment about wanting artists and dancers to have their own individual voice. There is no doubting she had her own individual voice.
But would have you liked a little bit more proficiency, or you're okay with it?
I think in order to win, in order to achieve greatness in whatever field or whatever sport, yes, you need more proficiency, but that doesn't take away her individuality.
And I think the difference here is breakdancing, to me, is all about self-expression, defying convention, breaking rules.
It's still
and so on.
It's still quite technical, though. Parts of it,
of course.
Yeah.
As opposed to ballet, which I don't think, as an art form, is like that. Its fundamentals are much more in
precision,
tradition, and so on and so on. So
it's a bit like the question I asked you around process versus culture. It's similar here around sort of, technical ability versus self-expression. These things are often, there's a tension there. It's kind of interesting though. I think we are willing to forgive a bit of technical ability if there's lots of self-expression.
Totally.
Whereas I think if we saw a perfect technical delivery of something with no self-expression, with no emotion, it would fall flat. We wouldn't be moved by it. I don't think we'd care, right? I don't know. That's how I feel.
That is so true. And it same goes for ballet dancers. Ballet dancers, especially now that the art form has evolved, have become so concerned and focused on technical execution, the way they turn, the way they jump, the way they form their leg, the way they shape their arm, whatever. And it just becomes more and more dry, and it loses that kind of soul,
Where to next for ballet, and how do you, and be a little bit out there if you don't mind, if you had complete free reign to do whatever you wanted and you didn't have to worry about stakeholders, you didn't have to worry about funding, you didn't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff, where would you take ballet? What would you do?
Two things. One is there's nothing like the power of live performance. Whether you're a Beyonce fan or whether you're a Swiftie or whether you love ballet, there's nothing like going to see something live and in color in the flesh in front of you. So I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel of how we perform. Where we perform and what we perform is really important, and to continue to evolve and attract and collaborate with things that interest audiences of today, and whether that's collaborating with Troye Sivan, or that's collaborating with Kate Blanchett. I don't know, I'm just throwing names out there that people can latch onto. But live art is, and the way we perform it is paramount. And the other thing is finding a way to kind of expose us in the digital platform. I think that's really important, and it goes against my first point, but it also gives us a level of exposure and a level of insider view that we can't do in a live performance. It's like the documentaries that have like changed the way people view a sport,
Yeah, Formula One, and
or even like the Celine Dion documentary, that just like, she just was all raw. She just showed how difficult her life is with stiff person syndrome. And finding a way with that, in a very kind of sometimes closed up art form is really, I think, important.
So you'd actually like to, for want of a bit of a word, sort of lift the veil a little bit and sort of show what it's really like, and like take away some of the maybe precision and perfection, and just like, here's what it's really like, people.
Yeah, because I think people actually, the mass public would be interested to see the dedication and the absolute pain and sweat and emotions that it takes to be a dancer, at the level of someone at the Australian Ballet.
Yeah.
I wonder if it would scare them. Do you think do they put in more hours than professional athletes, or do they have daytime jobs, or is it a full-time?
Yeah, it's full-time. It's, the day starts at 9:30, the day finishes at 6:30. That's if we're not performing. If we're performing, the day starts at 10:30 and finishes at 10:30.
And are there any brands or people that you think, I would love to get them involved in the Australian Ballet? Just for weirdness, not necessarily money, obviously, or whatever, or people who you think are a good fit for where the ballet needs to go?
One brand that I did some work with as a dancer was Nike. And I always saw a great parallel between like the dancer and the athletic brand. But a brand like Nike, because of how big they are, but also they're always, the hand is always on the pulse.
Yeah.
And I would like to draw a more parallel between a brand like Nike and what the dancer wears, how they wear it. I think that's a really untapped resource.
Yeah, that's great. And any person, while we're at it, is there another human at all? Like you mentioned Kate Blanchett before. I reckon you'll be speaking to the, I reckon there's a bit of overlap there. Anyone else pushing a bit more boundaries?
There are some amazing Australian artists that I would love to work with. I mean, Nick Cave is certainly one. Kylie certainly one. Troy Sivan is certainly one. And I think these are artists that can create something that taps into an audience that doesn't necessarily.
I can see it now, the Nick Cave murder ballet. I think it would be fantastic. David, if you're going to give advice to a young dancer, who's just starting out and has big dreams, and what would you say based on your journey?
Probably two things. One is, I've said this, it's a cliche phrase, but I really believe it. Hard work absolutely pays off. You cannot half-ass it. If you're serious about this career, or honestly any career that is, expecting elite output, hard work pays off. The second is find normalcy in what you do. When I was a kid, my parents, although they completely supported me dancing, they also wanted me to have a sense of normalcy within the dedication. And that meant dinners with the family at times, because I was always gone in the evenings training, or hanging out with friends, because the ballet dancer, when you're training, you can easily go off the cliff, and it's the only obsession. And I find that you do need balance to actually make your work and your expression of your art even better.
Do you get back to Arizona?
I was just there a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, right.
Same basement, same house?
Different house, no basement.
All right. David, thank you so much for pushing us to the fringes of what we're about here. So it's absolutely wonderful.
Before you go, David, we like to ask our guests one last question. and that is, if you were going to sum up your creative philosophy and put it on a black T-shirt, what would Davo's black T-shirt say?
Davo loves Australia. No, outward thinking. I think
outward thinking. Tell us
yeah.
more. Tell us more.
As artistic director of this company now, it would be so easy for me to only worry about the minutia of this art form, but we've unpacked that it's so important to reach new audiences and to connect with people in a way that they can connect. Well, the pub test. I mean, I listened to what people were saying at the pub, and I really like this art form. Me as artistic director, the outward thinking of embracing people and bringing people into this art form, I think, is what's really important, and not thinking so insular.
I think Oscars, it sounds like that's going to be a fantastic example of that. It sounds like that'll be amazing. So very best of luck.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah,
It sounds very exciting.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thank you.
Cheers, David. Thanks for coming on.
God bless you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Old Bergsy.
Yeah, Davo the dancer. Wasn't he fantastic?
Yeah, really great. Really interesting. I loved when he was talking about process versus culture.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of really good learnings in there. I think as marketers, as business people, we obsess over the process, but in the end, building a culture is really where we should put more effort and more time and more focus.
Yeah, the stronger the culture, the less need there is for process, because all the answers are kind of communicated just by the culture, which I think is fantastic. The other thing I loved about that whole conversation was this trade-off between innovation and tradition, and it's something that's staring him in the face with ballet, such a traditional art form, and he's trying to inject creativity into that. And as a dancer, you can only dance around the edges. Being artistic director, you still can't fuck with the machine too much, because you've got hundreds and hundreds of years of tradition to look after.
Yet he's making some bold choices. He's taking some calculated risks, telling a story, the story of Oscar Wilde. I can't believe that's the first time that sort of a story of non-heterosexual love has been told in a ballet. I find that if you think about every other art form and every other part of culture where we now don't have such a strict conservative view of that.
Totally.
I mean,
and then ballet's catching up. But isn't it fascinating as well that they've chosen to use a pre-established name in Oscar Wilde to innovate off, to go there in the same way? It's just to de-risk the whole thing. So somewhere along the line,
it's smart.
Yeah, it's very clever.
It's smart. But and also, I loved his response. I mean, Ray Gun, you're number one, card-carrying member of the Ray Gun fan club, Adam.
Yeah.
But I loved his response. I love the way it wasn't about how good a dancer she was. It was about her self-expression. Right?
Self-expression. That's right. Yep. It's great. He's a creative soul and has found his place in the world, doing amazing things. I'm going to go see Oscar. Will you be my date?
Let's do it.
All right. God bless.